And we're finally starting to get the go-ahead to release some of our stuff in English here. I think everyone can see the screen. So I started JCETI here in 2009, going into 2010. I won't get into all the details of the full personal story. I'll do a much longer version that we'll record probably in the fall of this whole story. But yeah, JCETI stands for Japan Center for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. First inspired by groups like CSETI and ESETI. No direct relation to either of them, except we're all connected through the airwaves and ethers. For those, the web is becoming increasingly important, and we've been offline quite a bit, kind of really in deep and underground out here, quite frankly. Especially in English, I've been in sort of this bubble shield in terms of input and taking information in, and also putting it out. So, but our main page, we just had a beautiful site update. The site was taken down by unknown sources 2 years ago, right when I was in the middle of a house. So we had a cyber attack occur right around the time we were getting revved up with the Serious Japan release. Now we recovered that by the skin of our teeth, and we had one little data backup that the girl who helps me was able to work with. And then the new site just went live. Beautiful new website, WordPress template went live a couple days ago. So we're going to have an English tab, and I think a lot of our English content is going to be video to start off with. That's the easiest for me to. Kei-san, hi, Englishですね。今日はすいません。申し訳ない。Okay, so yeah, and then we have a free mail magazine. I know a lot of people I've put you on that list, and we're going to be growing that up. And then also our main YouTube site is JCETI Japan. I do my best to try and put in parentheses when I title things English or Japanese. So just definitely look out for more English content coming out there, coming up here. And Facebook is Greg Sullivan in alphabet, and then our Facebook page. We have a page in a group at JCETI here. Okay, so just some basic stats. Our first event was on my birthday in 2010, July 19th, with my buddy, musician friend of mine and his newlywed wife. We were out until morning, all night at a mountain right on the sea's edge in Fukuoka, outside of Fukuoka City, which is in the westernmost island called Kyushu. Longitude, latitude-wise, we're about even with Georgia, so it's pretty hot in the summer here. And basically, yeah, that was an awesome event, and started a whole series of events that I couldn't have really predicted at the time. But we just had our 6th anniversary last month, and we've done over 250 events in total, over 50 contact sites across Japan. So as I was coming back from the U.S. to Japan, I definitely was getting the message that there was a ton of great places to do events. That's not only in the sense of field sites, but also in terms of hotels, pensions, and a lot of mom and pop type of operations that hosts screenings and lectures and talk shows. There's a very active event culture here in Japan in general, with the festivals, and just the compact nature of the country helps to facilitate that, I think. Our main book here just released my 4th book came out it just went on into the stores on the 23rd, a few days ago. 2 of those books have been discussion books, and the other 2 are just me. The first one that was just me is called You Too Can Make ET Contact. This was a real great primer. This publisher is sort of the coast to coast, so to speak, of book publishers. The interesting thing about the industry here is that while there is a lot of stuff online, the publishers are in there. The whole publishing industry is in its decline as everything goes digital. So they're actually taking a lot of this information that would be normally internet only and putting it into books. So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon that we might not see so much in the States. But so I hooked up with this pretty cutting edge publisher right in the beginning of their inception, and the owners broke off from a very large publisher here to do spiritual and consciousness and sort of conspiracy based or just sort of like alternative history based books. So they've released a whole ton of titles in the last 5 years, and I was one of their first wave writers here. And so we did this great book here, and it came together really fast, and just in a couple of months. And there was working with some of their best crew on that one. I'll just rewind here. When I first came, I was in Japan from 2003 for about 5 years until 2007-ish. Was home in the U.S. for a year and a half. I'm from New York, and I was in Manhattan working for Toyota in IT. I'm originally an audio engineer, so I wanted to keep the Japanese abilities going up, and I was in a long distance relationship with my then fiance. Some things I won't usually mention in Japan here, but and then I was working in Manhattan, and the IT thing lasted for only about a year, so it was a little bit too. It wasn't quite up my alley, and my time in the U.S. was limited anyway. So, as it turned out, and the next thing I jumped into was a microscope scale sales thing. This was an interesting little job because it provided a chance to see the world of the disclosure project sort of firsthand. A lot of our clients, it was a Japanese-owned company, but they needed American salespeople because their clients were often U.S. military and military-industrial complex companies that were had high security clearance ratings, and you had to be a U.S. citizen to get even into the building. So we would leave our passports at the door, and me and the other guys often, were listening to a lot of alternative stuff on the internet, and we would kind of ask roundabout questions. So I was in places like the MIT Air Force Base outside of Boston, MIT labs, and some of our other staff were meeting with NSA and CIA in hotels. They couldn't even go into the buildings. They had to have the demos of the microscope in nearby hotel rooms. So it was a pretty interesting. That only lasted for about 3 or 4 months, and then I was back to Japan in beginning of 2010. So and when I got back to Japan, I was really full blown into the kind of the data download, not so much reading a lot of stuff, but through the benefits of our friend YouTube and things like that, just plugging into a lot of topics that I used to be interested in. And I got back to Japan and kind of, I was in the music scene here and doing a lot of booking events and playing a lot of events and stuff and helping support foreign musicians visiting here on their tours. But within the spiritual /ET/ascension community, I had really not a lot of background. So I walked into this huge bookstore in Shinjuku and was browsing around and seeing what was out there, and really didn't see any mention of this kind of this disclosure, post-disclosure type of information. So the whole context of JCETI here and what's going on in Japan is that there is the whole scene is 10 to 15 years behind. We've done a lot of work in the interim to kind of upgrade that, so it's a whole different story now. But when I walked into this project, the Ascension 2012 was obviously a big topic, so there was a lot of that stuff happening, and a lot of other. I compare the CE5 work we do here to a lot of other spiritual workshops or schools that have been translated or localized here. One of them obviously being Hemisync. That's really a very popular Monroe. Robert Monroe's stuff is huge here. They have a very long-standing history and a very widespread network here, as well as obviously things even just as simple as yoga or TM Mace, Transcendental Meditation. TM was a huge hit here in the 80s. So just, it's been interesting to compare the localization of other foreign spiritual works and see. So our effort has been a lot more grassroots and a lot more organic, as as it kind of has to be with the subject material. But the basic point I'm making here is that there was a really what I found to be a totally deliberate exclusion of the really kind of more cutting edge or even the stuff we take for granted. The 2001 National Press Conference. It just makes you realize what a groundbreaking and industry change and kind of research field changing event that was. So kind of try and imagine the UFO community or the disclosure community without that information is probably pretty hard to do at this point. So, but that's where we were in 2010 in Japan. So it provided a lot of interesting challenges and also opportunities, because there was it was a fresh start in a lot of ways. So I was laser focused on what I wanted to do, so there was no question about that. And I'll just give you a couple. My first the hop, step, jump that occurred here. This is me in English school. I think all of us foreigners here have done this at some point. I originally started off. My first visa sponsor in Japan was a company that really pioneered children's English teaching in Japan, and that was based in Fukuoka. They're still around, obviously. I had kind of gotten a lot of some big dream points happening here with a recording studio I used to work with in Fukuoka. They sponsored my first visa on this next, as we started JCETI. So I was real psyched about that. But obviously, with the music industry in this state, it is now that wasn't exactly a full-time job. So I was supplementing income by selling off my entire collection of almost my entire collection of instruments and vintage synthesizers that I had put together over 20 years. So that was a great process of letting go of the past, for sure. So my eBay income helped me float for another few months there, almost 6 months to 9 months basically, and then I kind of crashed back into this English thing here for a minute. This picture just shows you that context. These kids all got as I left the school that year, they all got my witness testimony of what happened at Mount Adams when I first went there. So, a lot of these kids these days are indigos and starseeds and whatnot. So even just hearing that information kind of pushes a button in their soul, the soul switch. So I laid that experience on about 200 to 300 students before I left. And then in the first 5 years, I did a little bit of work in TV and the media industry, just as a foreign talent, they call it. And you can see me in the background here amongst a lot of other kind of bowl cut people holding cameras here. This was a pretty popular film called Michael Han. And it's just interesting the way that the time works. The holographic nature of time is the guy kind of right in front of me with the white clothes on is Mr. Himuro, and he's ended up becoming he was a popular comedian already at that time in 2009, but as I was in the U.S. for my term in the U.S., him and his partner became really successful, and when I came back, I noticed they were on TV almost every week. So they have a show where they interview foreigners arriving at Narita Airport, and I had no idea this show even existed, but I plugged into that, and then I was interviewed by them, and they participated in our event a few years later, and it was just funny to see his face, because we had this project was a pretty big film, and we had about 10 days plus of filming, so definitely we were always on the same shuttle bus, and went out to dinner a few times. So you could see his face as he saw me, like, I know this person, but I have no idea why he's doing UFO research and ET contact, so it's just, I always mention that to people when I show them that video. I'll have the English subtitles up on that. That was a pretty, the RET guides set that one up. And I got calls from people who are not friendly to our efforts in the TV industry, saying, "What the hell do you think you were doing?" And they were not pleased about that. So, and then we jump forward to, this is just again this hop, step, jump here of my giving a quick little brush of my time here in Japan. So from English teacher to gaijin talent, foreign talent, to what, to now, and then, this is during a guided meditation, and, running full steam in this Ascension ET contact thing. This is Okayama Prefecture in Western Japan last September. There was I've been invited to more and more of these outdoor festivals. It's a great opportunity to get the information in front of people who normally they have a very large potential interest, but they've been really kind of often have just the old or misleading impressions from Hollywood or entertainment or the TV. So, and then during the meditation, one of the people at the event was from the largest outdoor music festival in Japan called Fuji Rock, you might have heard of. And he snapped this one picture. Obviously, none of us saw it with a naked eye, but this enormous light burst, this kind of higher dimensional light burst in front of my head there was going on. And so we didn't have a whole ton of visual confirmation this night. There was obviously people that were kind of intoxicated. There was alcohol on the scene, so that was a little bit difficult to deal with energetically. But this was one little one bit of evidence or a great little picture we got out of that event. I got recently we've had a lot of this effort in Japan here has been, as I said, is sort of this insulated shield as far as not a lot of stuff coming in or going out, and especially in English. And even in Japan, I've done a lot of the bigger projects like the books, but I'm not a regular blogger or anything. That's starting to change. But I noticed that my guidance has been to that the actual gathering of people in the actual physical effort of gathering the physical events themselves are much more powerful and much more were sort of what we were supposed to be doing. And when it's it's sort of hard to share a lot of this stuff on social media. I don't really feel that comfortable releasing a lot of the stuff we have in sort of a really super casual format. I'd much rather have it narrated or more of in a report type of format. But at the same time, we've been so busy that it's hard to cull all that information for each event. So, but I got an interesting piece of information as I left for New Zealand. A few people, I think about a group of about 20 people gathered in the South Island with Ricky Butterfast from Colorado, and Mark, who's listening today from Tokyo, was there, and our small JCETI group, a handful of folks from Japan came with my wife and I. And so we were all there, and the morning we left, we were on our way to fly to Narita, and I got a message. I was still almost half asleep myself, and I was in the kitchen there, and I got a message from my guides, or that what they call our project. We've had one phrase, so that was they called us the Diamond Group, because our logo mark, if you trace the outside of the JCETI logo, it's a diamond. And then the other one is how they look at Japan is they called it Operation Sleeping Beauty, which is an interesting kind of thing, just like as we talked about the scene being so far behind, but at the same time, there's this really profound potential in the mass consciousness here, as far as conscious resonance goes, and the sort of hive mind effect in Japan. Once that does wake up, it's super powerful. So a lot of other researchers in Japan have talked about that, but it was cool to get a name for that. As I got back, I had two projects on the burner on the stove, so to speak. One was JCETI, the C5 initiative in Japan, and then also the other one was I was really inspired by Regina, who is now, I guess, on Gaia IM TV. At the time, they were CMN, Conscious Media Network. I was in touch with them a little bit on email, and I was planning to do a similar type of video-based interview site. So as I was in that bookstore I mentioned earlier, one of the people who released a lot of stuff was Nakamoto Kaoru, she's called. She does some events on conferences in the U.S. and Canada, but she had an office in New York City for a while. So I interviewed her, kind of one of the major figures here in Japan. I interviewed her in the first year as we were getting all set up there. And then another woman I interviewed in Tokyo had released some books. She was one of the few people who had mentioned the Disclosure Project at all in previous books. And as I interviewed her, she proposed that we do this dialogue, a collaboration dialogue book or discussion book together, rather. And so that first project occurred it started before 3/11 Fukushima. So as we entered the winter of 2011, we started working on that, and I was going back and forth to Tokyo, and so that book came out after Fukushima in the early summer of 2011. And then, as I mentioned, there was this whole blank of information. So we did our first official full preview or introduction of what disclosure is and that kind of stuff. Introducing the groups like CSETI, NISETI, introducing our intentions as JCETI, the connection to free energy and UFOs, a lot of basic stuff. But again, not a lot of this in the public awareness at all. So ARVs, cloud ships, chemtrails, Syrian felines, these topics were mentioned in this book. Our basic goals, which haven't changed, basically, are we're one of the, unbeknownst to me, we became one of the first few full-time ET contacts groups in the world. It's been quite a hell of a ride, and but actually Fukushima, this was all orchestrated, just like the return I had to Japan was written about briefly in a chapter in Jeff Becker's book, Paths to Contact. I'd like to flesh that story out a lot more. It's sort of like you see in the movie Adjustment. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's a great film with Matt Damon based on the short story by Philip K. Dick. But I highly recommend that. That's been very, very true to my experience with how the real big events in our lives, and especially when we get involved with these kind of service mission work. And kind of the Starseed mission is there's certain turning points that you've already committed to before birth in certain ways. So definitely experiencing that full time. The other huge thing was that at 3/11 Fukushima, I was already halfway moved to Tokyo, so I had already quit all my commitments in Fukuoka when the emergency hit, and I was on my way to Chiba, Japan, which is sort of on the closer side to Fukushima. So it was a nice way that they cleared the decks for me in Fukuoka. So I ended up stopping the move, canceled the move, and then and as the book was coming out, then it became obvious that, well, here we go. This is all coming together to be a full-time operation. So that's the way that really happened. It was sort of, obviously dealing with that in real time was quite an adventure, but I had my support network here from years past, the first 5 years I was here. So a lot of people came out of the woodwork to be of support and during that transition. It's always kind of hard to explain that as you from the actual experience and put it into words, but it's those kind of challenges that make you realize that you've got this unwavering guidance happening as well. So the first mission, the JCETI's objectives and what we've done, we introduced the C5 initiative in Japan and keeping that as true to its roots as possible, and also having to localize it too. There are, of course, some really big cultural differences here, enormous cultural differences here, and it was all sort of kind of running, flying by the seat of your pants, quite frankly. So a lot of the personal experiences I was having and the challenges that came along with doing such events. And the biggest thing I'd say is, I'm going to write about this a lot more, is interestingly is that, again, there is no official UFO research community here. So I was defaulted into the sort of spiritual / new age community, which still, isn't really totally that interesting to me. Obviously there's elements that are very, there's elements that are totally parallel and related as well. But what I've wrote a lot about in the book that came out this week is that what all of us who connect to the ET level, positive contact of our own on a personal level, are what we've all certainly achieved collectively is that we've gone beyond a lot of the limitations of, let's say, the guru teacher paradigm, and a lot of the kind of group mind, herd mind things that you might run into in other schools, all forms of pyramid and sort of top-down structures. These are all rendered disabled, rendered inert by the sheer power of the connection that you get when you do contact on your own. So having those fundamental basics as a starting point, and trying to push those forward in contexts that were really quite still rooted in that old paradigm of spiritual New Age was definitely not easy, especially in another language. So, and especially with basically zero reference points to work on. So that being said, the first 2 years plus of events were literally just by brute force. I had a full gust of wind in the sails. A whole lot of inspiration and power coming down from my guides. Some of the big guns like the Andromedans and the Syrian Lions, they don't screw around. So, and of course we had all order of trickery and someone in my position is very easily used by the predators and parasites out there. So I definitely learned my lessons in terms of self-mastery and how to, who we were supposed to be working with and who are our real supporters and who weren't, through several, those are all great episodes for people to I think reference to. You'll hear about those eventually. And then a couple of other things. Then as I realized, we had a lot of people coming in who had other needs. They of course they were interested in contact, but they were more of this star-seeded indigo, more about the ascension path, a really high, fast-paced spiritual awakening. So a lot of more personal interaction with these type of people, and we had a lot of events that were. I've had a lot of events that were off the calendar, sort of off event gatherings that were more of sort of briefings and for people that normally they might have had a name in the field already, or at times they were celebrities or people in those positions who needed to have more of a private setting. Most of those events were totally volunteer. So this again became quickly a totally full-time effort. I just mentioned to someone the first 2 years plus of JCETI, I was operating on a personal budget and an event budget of less than $1,000 a month. So I was completely pinched down. That was I got pretty used to living on a shoestring as being a musician in LA and New York. So those street skills were definitely pushed to the max out here in the first few years of JCETI. So that's okay. Then also and then unbeknownst to me at the time, I was quickly relations with many media outlets to recalibrate an outdated UFO media. So really it boils down to, I've kind of really boiled this down to a nutshell, is you've got your occult, your occult UFO world of the X-Files and abductions and implants and those kind of things, and then your spiritual contact. So that's a phrase I've been using a lot CE5 is a very tricky brand name to have in a language like in Japan. A Japanese in a language like Japanese rather. So recently I've just been using as an entry point spiritual contact or obviously ET contact. So tooling around with those key phrases and those keywords has been another ongoing thing here. But I'll just give you I'm getting a little long-winded here with this background, but very serendipitous and awesome collaboration right from the get-go was with the magazine called Anemone. They're they're the only monthly spiritual New Age magazine. They had basically no AT information in their magazine yet before they started working. I started working with them. And I was working directly often with the editor, I hooked up with their events department. So they were sponsoring our CE5s in Tokyo for quite a while. And we were able to do a full cover feature on JCETI, full cover feature on ECETI, and then a full cover feature on Sirius Disclosure and CCETI when that film came out. So that's been a great outlet. For little articles and stuff like that here and there. A great practice with editing in Japanese and everything for me. So, and then we, and like I said, we, translated the cream of the crop info from the West. A lot of people in my position kind of do, a lot of people in a similar position here in Japan, they're sort of like an affiliate based thing. They just kind of do everything and everything. So, but I've really that doesn't interest me at all. I think that's really detrimental when you're trying to put across information that is so deep and requires this sort of undistracted focus to really get the real core points across and to have the experience yourself. And then we also started doing tours through JCETI too, where I first had my experience in Mount Adams in Southern Washington. I first went over and did the interview with James Gilliland for the magazine as well. That was also a scouting run for the tour. And we've been doing that about 4 years now. And then in the interim, we were also guided to go to Maui. And at that time, James Gilliland was also guided there. We found out he was going to be there about 2 weeks before he went. So that was at times we've had this sort of RMIT, what he said he used to call the RMIT, these sort of international tours that happened in sort of it was more of the ETs needed us to be there rather than I wanted to go there or anything. And then New Zealand, obviously, before I came to Japan in 2003, I was in the first wave of New Zealand working holidays, first Americans in New Zealand with a working holiday. The company that sponsored that was in Connecticut, where I'm from. And so that was, I got a year visa there. So it was great to be back in New Zealand for the first time in over 10 years. And that was great event with everyone. And then we've also had a lot of this high-level ascension-based work, high-level grid working. Obviously, this is the land of the Fukushima disaster. I was in around New York in 9/11, so it's been quite a there's been a lot of really interesting things happening. I'll show you a video later that happened just before the recent Kumamoto earthquake. I'll just pick this speed up a little bit here. A quick, this is an early JCETI homepage traffic analytics scan, and like an analytics of who's looking at the site in Japan. And we see a lot of people at universities, Waseda University, Kansai University. One of the biggest ones, interestingly, is a company called Dentsu. They back all the TV stations and do a lot of production work for the TV. So they were looking at us from the get-go, and there's been a huge backlash on TV as far as an enormous wave of disinformation regarding anything and everything in the world unseen, starting first and foremost with the UFO issue in relation to how big the Sirius release here was. The film Sirius. Okay, so basically, this is a couple little slides from our lectures I usually do. Is as people in Europe might know, that the whole George Adamski thing was a lot bigger in other countries than it was in the U.S. I had no encounters with this. But the whole contactee paradigm of the 50s and 60s is completely over. The reason why I have to mention this in Japan is because the Adamski thing was quite big here. And we've had a lot of Adamski refugees. Most of them are open-minded enough that they kind of come on board with no problem. But once in a while, there are these kind of hardcore people. It really confronts the experience, the direct contact, the idea of free and unfiltered, unrestricted contact kind of flies in the face of what they've known until now. Usually it's the older men who have the biggest problem releasing those kind of pride issues. So my policy has been, hey, the exit's over there. I don't change what we're doing for anyone. So that being said, we have an interesting revolving door policy where, everyone takes what they need, they get what they need, and then they leave when they need. So I don't try and, a lot of the people in the spiritual community kind of try and stop people and say, hey, you need to be here. So I've kept a very hands off the wheel policy from the get go. That's the way it kind of has to be with this world. And we're moving into a more of an ascension based understanding of the ET presence and contact true goals. So just a quick, the Starseed mission, the contacting ET contact CE5 itself is enormously deep, and you could spend your whole life involved with it, of course. But the message we've gotten, especially in the last 3 years, is that contact, obviously, as we know, contact itself is disclosure, and then also contact is happening in the context of ascension. This is essential to realize. This is you can really you can lose a lot of. That adds a whole other dimension to the contact. So what is the Starseed mission? All the information, basically our biggest guidance has been people like Lisa Renee, at times Ajana Dean, her books. There's some not so great stuff in her books, but basically the light body activations and this sort of that's getting into back obviously into the spiritual realm, but the ET influence, the ET contact informed ascension information is sort of where we've been directed to go. Wanderers, Indigo, Stewards. This is obviously, JCETI is obviously a stewardship mission. We're holding space for a lot of people. And what I've been kind of guided to know is that the bigger the mission is, the less you know. So I was dumped into the deep end, and that's partially that. There are forces that are obviously trying to stop this. So if you know the scale of what you're doing, you're actually sending out a scale or imprint. It's like a beacon that allows that to be known. So people close to me and myself included have been kind of protected again in that sort of shield, and we get the information as it comes or as it goes along. So a lot of our projects have I don't again, Twitter and Facebook, these are all for me just ways that interference can come in. So we've experienced a lot of that. I won't cover that in this talk today, but we've got a whole hell of a lot of stories in that realm too. So okay, flipping in here. The big thing, so we had 2 or 3 years of groundwork, did a whole bunch of CE5 events, not all year round, nonstop through the winter. And Sirius came out here, disclosure finally hits the shores of Japan. So this was not only a huge thing for the whole world, but Japan especially, this was finally the kind of key thing that made everything click. So we did the translation for the Japanese version. In the original version released to Sirius, there was some technical issue that occurred with the what they call the SRT file, which links the time code of the film to the subtitles, so that some titles, the third title in every sequence was being dropped, or some titles were on the screen too long. So it was not professional grade at all. So we had to deal with that version for almost about a year, and then I finally got through to getting a contract, and we had the only other release of Sirius, an official release of Sirius out there. It's in Japan here. So this is the new DVD. My good friend who migrated to New York, his design company did an awesome job on our on the new jacket, and so we had the as we were doing this, we did a lot of screenings. There's the 4 pillars. I just wanted to run through this because the 4 topics in series, as I predicted in the first. The one detriment of the film, though, was that people were meeting the disclosure in the CE5 and the free energy information at the same time as this Atacama humanoid. And as I predicted in the very first major screening, there was almost 200 people there that day. I said, I can just tell you, the media is going to take this bit only and play with it. And that is exactly what happened. Just completely trashed out, tying it into other, they have all the, just, these are the sports and gossip newspapers here you're seeing. And I was getting, I got a lot of, I have the, Japan rights here to the film. So all the TV stations came to us to ask if they could use clips of this. And I was refusing most of them. 90% of them I refused. And so then as I've found, a lot of the higher ups in these in the TV industry it's a pan network thing. They're all connected, so they knew that this Sullivan kid is an annoyance. So we'll just start using the pictures that are online. So then they got away with the kind of a loophole in the copyright thing. So I would get texts from people all across the country like, "Are you seeing this show? And are you seeing the show with the Atacama humanoid in it right now? It's this channel and this show." And I looked up and I look on my email and I had just refused their offer a few days ago. So they just completely bulldozed through and started using the pictures that were already online, sort of a gray zone, copyright gray zone. We made a little brief, these are 2 really close supporters in Okinawa where we had some of our most intense contact. We were in that little clip there, a brief little cameo in the film. The JCETI logo, interestingly, is also the same as the Isuzu. It's a bell that was during this song and dance that happened in the ancient Shinto mythology. This is the shrine in Nara Prefecture that has the same 3 symbols. I was in LA. I met the director and producer. That's how we got luckily they were actually by coincidence in the same town as my cousins. So I was in LA and I was able to meet the film crew here and definitely get their support as well in the Japan version. These are just some shots of our screenings. A lot of big gatherings in Tokyo and stuff. So I was doing a lecture and question and answer at each time as well. Couple of radio shows again, and these are all grassroots events. So the number of TV requests to use the Atacama humanoid in a unsavory way were several, nearly 20, and the number of requests for JCETI director Gregory Sullivan to introduce the film properly, 0. So that's what I always tell people. So it's just been a total bread and circus, the ultimate bread and circus out here. One of these days we'll go through and do a webinar and I'll translate some of the shows. We've basically, this month I've actually been revved up in the past couple of days. There's been a lot of direct attack on our work. The contact work has been kind of cloned and copied and spun in the TV industry. So it's been quite a challenge to keep quiet about that because the ETs have really told us that we shouldn't be kind of responding to those things at the same level of frequency. So, but I'll just throw this out there. We've through interactions, I've met most of the people who have been the sort of media stalwarts out here. And we know that there's a team of at least 5 people who are, basically U.S. intelligence controlled opposition, and they also are getting paid by local religious groups. So it's a complete mess out here. That's why I've been sort of imported from abroad here in some ways. There is not a culture of calling that stuff out in Japan, so these people just get away with murder, editorial murder, so to speak. So we're really we've got a lot of dirt on these folks that will come out one of these days. But it's been definitely a complete counterattack in the past year and a half, 2 years. There was in 2015 there was over 20 UFO specials, 2 to 3 hour specials. None of them again, with the most active group in ET contacted Japan, JCETI, 0 offers to be on. I was on the largest show in Japan TV in general, so it's not like they don't know me. You know what I mean? So I know a lot of these people are hooked up with the Dark Masons and the Dark Occult. So it's a very small microcosm of what's happening in the West out here. So I've met these people. They know who I am, and that's why they're not calling me. So they tried to spin me into their sushi roll, and I said no fucking way. And it's all about deception. So they know I knew what was going on, and they just bailed out. They just never followed up. So well, that's a whole other interesting story. Okay, so CE5 Japan, a new breed of ET contact, nearly 2,000 participants in 6 years. Again, so it's not like this isn't worthy of TV coverage. We had that one show that was a nationwide thing with the guy I showed you earlier, the comedian guys. That was totally ET orchestrated. It went right through all of the control mechanisms. It was a beautiful shot in the dark, but a rare one indeed. These are some slides from my lecture here. And navigating the information maze. I always comment about the we're coming up on 1 hour. I'm hoping to get through this in about an hour and a half. I'm just take the pace here is a little bit slower here than I did last time, but I hope you're still okay for time. I'm going to probably go for another about 40 minutes tops. The navigating the information maze, as I was getting, I don't think it's obviously the best reference, but obviously in Coast to Coast has a whole lot of influence out there as well. The interesting thing about Coast to Coast is that when I was in an elementary school in the 3rd or 4th grade in upstate New York, I remember not being able to sleep. My buddy and I always used to kind of set our alarms for 3 or 4 a.m. just to see how it was like in the middle of the night. And I remember the alarm had the radio on, so I was mesmerized by someone's talking about some sort of abduction scenario or ET thing in the middle of the night. And then fast forward 15 to 20 years later, I'm living in Tokyo, and I started listening. I somehow stumbled upon that on YouTube, and realized that was the same show. So I've definitely done the whole media buffet thing, in terms of all of these sorts of topics. But it has an end and it has a limit. So I always tell people, as you're entering the CE5, as you're entering the world of direct experience, there's only so much. This takes way too much time, and that's the way it's formatted to be. This whole information maze, the direct experience actually provides a shortcut, an enormous shortcut that ties all the information together. So I remember being at Mount Adams that first time when I had my first experience, and the information that I had and the knowledge that I'd garnered until then provided a strong base of understanding, but it was the experience that stood on top of that was really the most powerful thing in general. So going backwards, we find a lot of people coming to this being said to people who are about to start their own little working group or are having little outings of their own, is that I noticed that the biggest one of the biggest blocks to going forward in the actual direct experience it can be the information. So it's sort of it's a balance. I kind of noticed that personally that the more the experience level rose, the less the information became actually that important or necessary. So, and the topics and the energy that we're dealing with here is very, it's more of an eternal and of the infinite nature, and it's very simple. You know, the deepest things out there in the world are actually very simple. So, the information world, you know, and then contrasting that with the world of, you know, trying to sell books, and the way the publishers approach this is that it's a whole different mindset. So again, that's been an interesting balance to try and keep going. These are just slides from a lecture I used in Japan here, just describing the basic elements of C5 and whatnot. I'll just show you a few of the locations. Obviously, these are this almost looks like a put together picture, but these were filtered by the photographer. This is Mount Tateyama, Standing Mountain, one of the 3 holy mountains. It's in the northern Alps. Fantastic location. We had a couple 2-night, 3-day trainings there, 2-night, 3-day outings there in the past. Recently, it's a popular tourist area, so there's been a real crush on the lodge reservations lately. So we were kind of guided that for a couple of years now, where it will be not going here. But in our last, in the first time we were there, with a group, it was over 30 people, and we had the cameras up on these benches here. We had a DSLR, and then we had my night scope up there, and I recorded the light ship coming down the valley here. And what we've noticed is that a lot of the most intense stuff they won't let us film. So actually, a being then flew into our circle. We had a couple other people who could see, had the inner sight, and they basically froze my camera, and they shut the cameras down. The one biggest regret is that just as the contact was really ramping up, the recorder I had going had a frame that had the ships. They were, I'm pointing to the mountain. You can see the building on top is the peak of Mount Tateyama. There's a shrine up there. And along this ridge, there was a bunch of craft posed. And at the very top, there was an orange light ship coming in and out from behind the mountain there. You could see this chemtrail X. The military then said, we saw you. This was all on radar. They marked the spot the next day. And it was a major landing event, major contact event. And the one regret I had was that I pulled the battery out of the recorder, because there was one frame on there that showed the ships in line like that. So I wish I should have been more astute and taken a photo of that with a smartphone or something. But so we lost that one bit of evidence. But it was a major. So we experienced that's the thing they've sort of guided us to, is that they will give you some footage and evidence, but the most intense experiences are meant to have directly right now at this point in time. This is Yamaguchi, very early event. Again, a lot of ground light activity in Japan. The country is 80% mountainous, so a lot of lights on the ground. It can be difficult to. They often like to pose, and it looks like there might be a path there or a road there where they are, but then you look it up later and there's nothing there. So we've had them posing as lights and on the street lights, and then going off and flickering and all sorts of stuff in front of us. And then obviously I'll show you in the videos later. You'll see the night vision footage. This is a pretty fairly large group with men and women and children of all ages there in Kansai. This was a great example of the guidance I was getting. I think it was the direction to west, it might have been, and I had this in mind, and we were looking out towards the ocean the whole time, and it was getting colder and colder, and people started to go into the hotel, and finally, when we finally did look west, it was already almost after 2 a.m. I think, and a handful of, I think about 7 people stayed out there. And this craft came right down into these woods here. They were in the trees there, right behind the hotel. And again, it's like when I find that there was a major spiritual leader, sort of a real popular figure in the field there at that time. in this event, and they didn't believe their eyes. They kept thinking, oh, this was got to be, it looked like, someone was doing donuts, like a motorcycle was doing donuts in the trees there. But you just, when you're seeing it, it doesn't look, it almost looks, the ETs love to ride that line of, is it real or is it not? So it's a real challenge of our perceptual facilities. So again, I just let that sink in and not really force that, to be, I don't really try and force the point. An interesting thing happened here. A lot of times people have talked about temperature rises in the field, as many of you know. This was one rare case where I experienced a deliberate temperature just decrease. The ETs wanted me to go in and have these people had to have their own experience. It was a really rare case. I found out later that possibly the part of the reason was that some of the people around this guy were in sort of that kind of dark occult realm. So it potentially would not have been good for him to know that I was sort of the key point. Like, he needed to have that be his experience, and him to hold he needed to hold his own scepter on that, so to speak. So the ETs got me out of the way. I just got so cold, and I was like, I just can't stand it anymore. It was like 3 a.m. and I just had to go in. So the rest of them, 4 or 5 people, stayed out and had even more lights apparently. So that was interesting. This is a Fukuoka Prefecture in Shikanoshima Island. You could see the laser beam. This was not a camera. There was 4 shots in a row of these beams coming down. These are the kind of works. This is sort of the close range contact that occurs. You can see an orb next to the beam there. A lot of orbs on site here in Saitama Prefecture. You'll notice that there's just to almost mention, a lot of Japan is amazing in terms of being outside at night. It's obviously a super safe country, and the nice thing is that there's no state park permit requirements or any hassles with the police. We've had 0 run-ins with the police or anything like that. And then also, but at the same time, we have made use of a lot of not so ideal, this isn't Joshua Tree National Park, and we've had to at times, we're mobile at times, we're standing at times. So that is different from the sort of orthodox kind of contact field work you might see, but we make it work for sure. This is the lecture. Always, no matter how many times someone's been at the events, we always do the same lecture. We always do a lecture and kind of an indoor meditation. It is harder to do the image training and the meditations outside. Chiba here. I just was in Hokkaido for the first time in 3 years. I just got back the other day, and this was in at Sapporo Station on the 34th floor of the tower there, the station tower, enjoying a Sapporo beer as the ships flashed at us for over an hour from the mountains here. This is just next to a major shrine right outside of the city. Again, major regret. Why didn't we run the smartphone video? And we just got some photos, but again, they pop in at the strangest of times sometimes. So we were having a sort of staff meeting over dinner here at this time. So they're responding to our, as long as you're focused in on them, you don't even have to be doing the protocol. So they'll pop in to say hi at these random times, for sure. What looks to be an enormous cloud ship here on the flight back from Hokkaido. I use this shot in the book. Shizuoka Prefecture, where you can see, this is a really awesome picture. You can see one of the beings in the window. The night before, we did a major screening of the film Sirius in Tokyo, and we then took the last train. This area is in the Izu Peninsula. It's about 2 to 3 hours outside of the city. Me and myself and the woman hosting the event out there drove down the night before. And as we pulled into the area, one of her friends provided us her summer home overlooking the ocean, and we used that as our base of operations for the workshop and to stay at. And as we got out of I could feel this really big presence. We arrived at around 3 a.m. And as we pulled into the beach town, this little surfer town. I could feel the presence coming in, and it was real starry out, and I knew we were going to have a sighting. And as we hit the gate of the house, I looked up, and there was, just like in the film, there was 4 ships. There was 2 at first, and then 4. 2 more appeared. We had 4 craft cruising over the area. The next night, we had our event, and you could see this red face. It looks almost like or Iron Man in the window here. This turned out to be an Orion being. It was protecting our work. And he's in a contact suit. It's a full regular human lineage ET. And he's got the suit on, so and you could see me. I've got my eyes closed here. I was in sort of a semi-meditative state. We're moving. We were about to leave one site and move to another in this microbus, and I could feel the energy. It was really nice in the back of the head coming in, and you could see these streamers behind my head as he's kind of pulling into 3D. And awesome shot here. It just goes to show you a lot of those ideas from the Marvel and DC comics are real. They're the real channelers, those artists, the comic guys. Okay, we're about to get into some video here. Okay, thank you for waiting. If anyone wants to make any announcements or anything in the chat, we've got 9 or 10 people here. Okay. Those of you who are at home, next time we do this, if you're ever out on the move or whatever, be aware that Zoom is also an app in the iPhone store, so you can throw that onto your smartphone and tablet, and you can listen in the car or on the train or whatever. Okay, so I'm just getting some video ready here. Just give me another minute or so here. One of the major groups we hooked up with, as I was in Olympia, Washington, there in June last year, I believe it was last year, we got really plugged into the Emoto Masaru group. You know, his Dr. Emoto Masaru he's the most well-known Japanese researcher in other countries as far as consciousness and spirituality goes. And of course, he did the that's amazing. He did the water crystal research. Okay. And I hooked up with his group, and we had the person who took over his work after Dr. Emoto passed away is Dr. Nimoto, and he's a great guy. And he travels all over the world. I'm talking about the Dr. Emoto's work, and he happened to be in Seattle right at the same time as one of our Mount Adams tours last year. So he had a great experience at the JCETI Ranch in September. And then last year, one of their the Emoto-related groups in Italy, in Rome, wanted to do a large meditation and prayer for Fukushima and the healing of the Earth's water from Japan. So that came together in May, end of May, and I was and because of the experience that Dr. Nimoto had at JCETI, he invited me to be there. So I stayed over with them, and that night we had an awesome contact. And Dr. Emoto's son was skeptical up until that night. He was standing right next to me, and then he really got turned on that night. So we had several visual sightings, and I then ran into the hotel to get my night scope, and you'll see a couple of bits we got. This is the first ship that came down. It was also visible by the naked eye. It's a really slow moving, it's wavering, and Dr. Nimoto just presented this information at another conference in Japan in a collaborative effort, and between him and I, and he did a bunch of screenshots where you draw a straight line with a ruler tool in a graphic editing software, and you could see that there's this wavering. It's definitely not a straight line. Right now, you can see that the craft is now going out of phase and it's disappearing from the scope's vision. The left half of the screen is washed out because of the full moon, the light of the full moon. But if you look in the middle, the craft is actually pulled out and disappeared. As we know, the night scopes, this is a Gen 2 scope, so it's a little bit grainy, and it's in black and white. But as we know that even with the Gen 2 scopes, that an object can't pull out infrared. It's nothing physical can disappear from the vision, the view of these scopes in the middle of the sky. And then this next clip was amazing. You could see two craft, one, and you could actually start see the little kind of more individual lights in this one. It's more stepped down, and it's lower, and it's kind of got this diagonal curve to it. It's now at the top of the frame, and in a minute, right below the text, you're going to see the other one just came into the frame. Now you've got two. They're flying in tandem, and you could see them getting closer and farther apart in proximity. And so that's obviously not a satellite, and there was no sound, so this was not a jet or anything either. So this was a really low-level flyby, and it's interesting. You could see them it's a lot different from the higher up the craft that are higher up. They are actually kind of spinning like this. They're changing their vector of flight, and they're actually, you could see them moving in the atmosphere a lot clearer than a lot of the type of exoatmospheric or higher altitude craft you get. I was just listening back to the so on the feed here, it might be a little bit grainer here. I'll definitely put this up on Vimeo or YouTube here for everyone. I was just listening back to the Dr. Nimoto, his presentation from 2 weeks ago was up on YouTube now, and I was listening to it, and we did a table tipping session with James Gilland when he was at the ranch, and Dr. Nimoto in his private session was asking about, are we going to get support? Will the ETs come and everything? And it was interesting to hear again the time slip. James says, "Get your cameras ready." That's what the ET said, and get the cameras ready. So I was out in the field, and our little C5 demonstration was happening after the actual water ceremony, but the ships came in early. So I was out there, and I saw they were in the sky. I had a couple flash bulbs. And after our first visual sighting, I ran in and got the camera, luckily. So James's message was right on point. Get those cameras ready. So another one. This is amazing. This is an amazing clip. This is one of our. This year has provided some of the most awesome footage, and the Kumamoto earthquake occurred on 4/14, April 14th, I believe it was. I was here in Kyushu. It was a really sunny day. The earthquake in Kumamoto is about 300 miles, 250 to 300 miles from where I am. But we were shaking like crazy too. And we were in that same vicinity 3 years in a row. This year and last year were both in the middle of winter. It was snowing in the field this year a little bit. I'd like to get a couple more. If you want to look up on Google or whatever, Aso, that's the largest ASO, Mount Aso. The Aso Kuju National Park is the world's largest volcanic caldera. So we were on Kyushu there, and we had a major ground lights event here. And what you're basically going to see is not only a successful CE5, but we're actually seeing them tuning up the field. They're actually doing earthworks, or they're preparing for the earthquake, to put it frankly. They could see it. Obviously, they knew it was coming. And compared to Fukushima, this was a much. I know it made national news, but it was a much more controlled thing. So I've been calling it an ascension earthquake. A lot of the conspiracy buffs every earthquake they call a man-made earthquake now. But it's this whole thing. We need to get beyond the information, just the information matrix, and these conspiracy people who aren't plugged into the reality of ET contact are just they're in an endless loop. It's a negative loop. And here we have the footage just that proves it. The ETs were on the ground, on site, less than 2 months before the event, and we were involved with this process. It was an amazing. The events in Kyushu, where I had almost no events for about 2 to 3 years, and the only place we ever went to besides locally here in Fukuoka was this area. So this also, by the way, is on the 33rd parallel, so on major spiritual implications there too. But you'll see right from the get-go, there's one light there, and then this guy right here, very close, pretty close range, big old ground flare. And you see watch him fade out like this kind of fade out effect. I'll just stop it right here. The year before we went to that. We saw the lights the first year in this area too, and so we actually the second year, last year, we drove the car out here, did a check, went back to the field, and then as we got out of the car, there was lights there in that same area. So they were stealthed down, and this is a very large grassland. Turn the volume down on the music. This is a very large grassland, highland area you're looking out into. It's a little washed out because of the moonlight, and it was cloudy. And the camera is so shaky because they appeared so suddenly that I was in a rush to start filming. But all these lights out there are not cars. And you'll see them merge together. You'll see them instantly. The length of the lights kind of instantly extend dramatically and change direction. They'll disappear all of a sudden, appear all of a sudden. So they're in the middle of their night shift. You know what I mean? This is not just an extreme contact event. This was in prep. This was in direct relation to the Kumamoto earthquake. And these are the Orions. The Orion Council of Light, the Orion groups. They work with the Earth grids of energy, and we've checked in that in a few different ways psychically. A lot of their ships seem to be the white ones, the whitish ones, the white lights. These were all. The scope was helping because it was quite far out there in the field. This was, I'd say, probably that distance has got to be at least 4 to 5 kilometers out there away from us. So. But then you'll see the one that comes even closer. It comes right to the edge of the forest there, and you're going to see this enormous flare. So again, very even if that last light, you could say, oh, that might have been a headlight or someone's with the high beams. They kind of put that to rest with the with this next one. As this guy is, the person next to me is flashing the laser at. It's coming closer and closer to the forest edge there on the next hill in front of us, and now he's going to do a huge power burst. Obviously, this was very visible with the naked eye, and everyone was just going crazy, loving it. And a couple other points from this one. We're standing on a grass, open grass fields are kind of a rare thing in Japan, in some cases. And this case is enormous energy burst here continuing. And this occurrence for here was in our first bit. We were out from 9:30 to 11, not even that long. And then the next clips occurred after midnight. We slept a little bit and got up again at 1:30. And on both times, the second I put foot down off the asphalt onto the grass, the craft flared out. So they were reacting. They can even react to things as minute as our body motions. I know people. A lot of us have experienced that in the field. But that was just another awesome confirmation. It was twice in the same night. We parked the car on the edge of the the entrance to the hotel and get out of the car on the asphalt. And then the second you put one foot down on the grass of the field site, boom, the lights come up in reaction to that. So that was awesome. Okay, yeah, so looking at this kind of footage, also just so we're getting towards 90 minutes here, and I'm one other one. This is a little bit better of a night scope here. I'll just leave that. I'll leave it at that. Another huge flare. I don't have the adapter here for this one yet, but there's a huge flare on the water. This is one of our prime locations in Okinawa. There's street lights in the background. There's those 3 street lights, but this very bright one in the foreground is on the water, and watch it just slowly fade out and fade down. And then another one pops up over here in the foot of the mountains, just flashing here. So again, this one's still going. Watch it. We'll just show this fade out here. It's still there, and it just slowly fades down, fades out. You can see clearly the other unmoving street lights behind it. But this is on the water down in this little cove, and slowly fading out. We've had all manner of anomalous lights in this area. Yeah, I just said it disappeared. Yeah, so recent that's I've got a couple other stories here, but we're getting up on time here. I'm just going to show other clips. I don't know if anyone has any quick questions. We have a little bit more time. That's about it for my video here. I showed you pictures of the kids event. I've got one other, see if I download that picture. I got a great shot we had another free trial event in about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago now, where we had a cool picture come through. I'll have to get this off of Facebook. Excuse me here. And if anyone wants to make a comment in the chat or throw out a question, feel free as we wind down. I'm just going to stop the screen share just for one moment. Here's a shot of okay, yeah, this is one a great shot from the field. Here we go. And you can see the crazy lights here. Screen share. I've got a low battery message coming through. Look at these lights. They're in front of people's third eye and hearts. Then they have these little arrowheads on here. People were not wearing any sorts of lights, or there was nothing reflecting in the field like that, which was really strange. Here, I'll zoom up on this. Here we go. Look at, this is about 60 people in the circle. And then there's this really strange light behind here. Look at these, they're coming from the third eye with these squiggles that look like arrows. Really cool. And then this strange light in the background. It almost looks like there's someone standing in here. And then on the other side of the circle, there's right in front of people's hearts. These are obviously, look at these arrows. And these people are not wearing any kind of lights, and no one was moving. So this was really a nice anomalous shot that came through. One of the people who help us in this area sent me. You can see some young kids in the field here too. Yeah, so it's just it's awesome to have when everyone there's no doubt and no fear. That we had several craft coming through in one night. Hi Jeff. Okay. Would it be interesting? Let me talk about Jeff Becker's got a great question here. Ted and Meet. Hi, Carolyn. Yep. Say hi to Ted and Michi for me too. And Dr. Nemoto just had his awesome presentation. I'll be out there. I will be out on Thursday, so I will definitely give you guys a call. I'll be in Portland. Jeff, we've been plugging into the Syrians. Basically, it seems like when we research a lot of the people's star roots, the Syrian consciousness seems to be. Oops, let me get a screen share. Yeah, here we go. The Syrian consciousness seems to be more the engineers. That's like and data. People in medical field, and I was an audio engineer. People who work with a lot of information and that sort of high volumes of information. I think you were an engineer or in your military career. I know definitely you've got that going. A lot of that kind of how'd you say a focus on details and numbers, mathematics that seems, and architecture that seems to be a part of the Syrian consciousness. The felines, I know James Gilliland was the first person who told us about this, and I've kind of come at it from my own experience as well. And the fifth dimensional felines, when I had my first session with James, my guide at that time was Bagit, who she's a feline Syrian. I had a lucid dream the night before the session with her in it. I had seen her picture in his book before, but I had a lucid dream, and then I had the session, and I could feel my crown chakra being opened up with this like honey dripping down, and the energy work they do. And I noticed that then there's the sixth dimensional panther beings. My sister has she used to run marathons, so she has this panther guide, and she had the session, and immediately within 6 months, she had no experience with yoga or spirituality or anything, and within 6 months of that session, she was teaching yoga in Boston. She had a major energetic opening. These guides are just standing by, and once you give them the go ahead, they're just on it. And then the lion beings, I was a lion in the past life. They're the seventh dimensional beings. They're about 4 to 5 meters in height, and they're just like super. They're all these felines are super loving, very playful energy. They're also, they do a lot of powerful energy work and healings, and they're also they were known as the guardians of the protectors of the gods. So in India, the pictures of the Narshringa, they're standing around the blue skinned Hindu gods as protectors or bodyguards. So when you have a big event, when we do large events, like they're the big guns that come in and then do protection work energetically and things like that. So also the other thing with the lion beings, they're super funny. It's we just had we did a table tipping session. We've been really pushed to go and do our own tippings as well this year. I just did 20 people in an event, and the Syrians come in and people just can't stop laughing. It's like this drunk, just like this energy high. They just crack you up. It's so such a high vibration, very, very powerful, supportive and loving energy. So I'll give you a couple names. The two major guides that we work with are Kaha. That's usually Kaha, but it can be Caha, and her partner. And these both originally came through at JCETI, but Bakal, Bakal. Those, if you just knowing the names is a real thing. That's their key operating code. So if you call in Bakal and ask them, hey, I want to feel your energy or work with me in dream contact, they'll come to you and definitely. If you look up Narshringa or lion beings, there's a few images online. If you just put that in print out a picture of that and just look at it, and you can tune into them there, that way as well. The pictures of Bagheet are up online, and actually, it's so funny. I'll try and send these. I don't know. I'm running very low on battery. I'm going to have to cut off in a second here, but These lions have even come through in the clouds. We've had two people. When James came to Tokyo in December, one of our members who's gone to the ranch now 3 times was out having a cigarette break outside the restaurant, and he shot a picture in the sky that turned out to be Kaha's energy. It looks like a face. And then recently, another woman I knew, she had no idea about these beings, and she took a picture. It was clearly a lion face in the night sky, so that was awesome. They're definitely tuning in now big time. So just try and use those 2 names to try and use those 2 names to try and tune in internally, and you'll start to feel the energy, I think. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. So yeah. This is again always a new and exciting thing for me to share, but a whole lot of episodes I'm slowly getting through as I prep for the next event in Portland. I'll have a little more of a detailed presentation as we go next time. So feel free to jump on again. These are all going to be available free on Zoom here, and yeah. So anyway, it's just after 90 minutes here. We've gone. It's now 10:30 our time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. So I'll call it at that. I've got a screen recording of this. I think it went pretty smoothly. I don't think there were any net hiccups, so the audio should be pretty clear. So thanks, guys, for all your time, and I hope you enjoyed it. So we've got we're slowly going through our video archive, and I hope to have a little more of a report type of presentation of these. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, thanks for all your work. Everyone, if you haven't seen, I know a lot of you got the Paths to Contact book. It's obviously still on Amazon. Look up Paths to Contact. A good handful of CE5 experiencers are in there. I know Jeff Becker is working on a new website, and there's a lot of great, interesting projects coming up. So anyway, I'll be back to you in probably the fall. I'll do my presentation in Portland. Hopefully we'll record that, and I'll also get some more stuff from the recent book out there. One last, so yeah, I'll leave it at that. And we'll talk to you again. Thanks a million for participating, everyone. Thanks. See you later. Bye-bye.